You already know the morning matters. You've heard it 1,000 times. You have read about it. You have watched videos about it. You may have even tried to build one. Waking up earlier, drinking water, reaching for your phone a little later than usual. And then life happened. The alarm moved. The routine dissolved. You returned to what was familiar, not because you were lazy, not because you lacked discipline, but because what you were building was a routine without a foundation, a series of actions without a reason, a structure built on motivation, and motivation, as you already know, does not last. This is different. What Marcus Aurelius practiced every morning for decades was not a routine in the modern sense. It was not a checklist. It was not a productivity system. It was something far more fundamental than that. It was a daily reclamation of the mind, a deliberate act of deciding before the world had the chance to decide for you who you were going to be that day. And the reason it changed his life, and the reason it will change yours, has nothing to do with what he did in the morning. It has everything to do with what he understood about the morning that most people never stop to consider. The morning is not just the beginning of the day, it is the most vulnerable moment of the day, the moment when your mind is most open, most impressionable, most available to be shaped. Either you shape it or everything else does. Most people hand that moment away without even realizing it. The phone, the news, the notifications, the immediate rush of other people's urgency flooding a mind that has not yet decided what it values, what it intends, what kind of person it is trying to become today. And once that flooding happens, once the mind has been filled with noise before it has found its own signal, the rest of the day becomes a reaction, a series of responses to whatever arrived first, not a life being directed, a life being carried. The Stoics noticed this, clearly, precisely. 2,000 years before the smartphone existed, they understood that the mind which begins the day without intention will spend the day without direction. And a mind without direction does not find peace, it finds exhaustion. Marcus Aurelius understood this more deeply than most, because the stakes for him were higher than most. He did not wake up to a manageable day. He woke up to an empire, to war dispatches, to political betrayal, to the kind of responsibility that would crush a person who had not already, before any of it began, decided who they were. And every single morning he sat down and wrote, not for anyone else, for himself, private words, a private practice, a daily conversation with his own mind about what mattered, what was real, and how a person of character moves through the world. Those words became the Meditations, and if you read them carefully, you begin to see the structure underneath them, the pattern, the morning practice that made everything else possible. That practice is what we are going to walk through today, not as a checklist, not as a series of steps to follow in order, but as an understanding, a deep, grounded understanding of what the Stoic morning is actually doing and why, when you truly grasp it, 30 days is all it takes to feel a shift that does not fade. Stay with this all the way through, because what comes at the end matters as much as what begins here. Every morning, without exception, you wake up in the middle of a battle you did not choose. Not a battle with other people, not a battle with your circumstances. A battle with the automatic version of yourself. The version that has been running so long it no longer needs your permission to operate. The version that reaches for the phone before the eyes are fully open. The version that replays yesterday's frustrations before today has been given a chance. The version that moves from alarm to obligation without a single moment of genuine awareness in between. That version is not you. It is what you have practiced. And what has been practiced can be interrupted. But here is what most people misunderstand about that interruption. They think it requires force. They think building a morning routine means imposing a new set of actions on top of the old ones, waking up earlier, adding more, doing more, achieving more before the rest of the world has begun. That is not the Stoic morning. That is just a busier version of the same unconscious pattern wearing a more productive disguise. The Stoic morning begins with something that looks like nothing from the outside. It begins with stillness, with the deliberate refusal to move before the mind has been consulted. Before the body has dragged the self into the day's momentum, there is a pause, brief but real. A moment where you ask, not dramatically, not philosophically, simply and directly, who do I intend to be today? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous and surly." Most people read that and hear pessimism. They are wrong. That is preparation. That is a man who understood that the day would bring difficulty, not as a possibility, but as a certainty, and who chose to meet it with awareness rather than surprise. He was not poisoning his morning with negativity. He was removing the illusion that the day owed him ease, because the person who wakes up expecting a smooth day is not prepared for the real one. Every frustration becomes a disruption. Every difficulty becomes a crisis. Every person who behaves badly becomes a wound, because there was no preparation, no space, no prior decision about how a person of character responds to these things. But the person who wakes up and says, "Today will be hard, and I've already decided how I will meet it," that person moves through the same day differently. Not because the day is different, because they are. This is the first and most essential element of the Stoic morning. Not meditation in the popular sense, not journaling for gratitude or visualization of success. Simply this: the deliberate, honest acknowledgement that the day ahead will ask something of you, and the quiet, private decision made before the day has had a single chance to pull you off course about what kind of person will answer. There is something that happens to the mind between sleep and full wakefulness that the Stoics paid close attention to. In that space, that brief, soft window before the day's identity fully reassembles itself, the mind is unusually honest. The defenses are not yet up. The performance has not yet begun. For a few moments, you are simply yourself, unfiltered, unguarded, present in a way that the rest of the day rarely allows. Most people rush through that space without noticing it. They fill it immediately, the alarm, the phone, the mental rehearsal of the day's obligations. And in doing so, they skip the only moment in the day when the mind is genuinely available to be redirected. The Stoic morning practice begins precisely here, in that window, with a question, not a complex question, not a philosophical inquiry that requires extensive thought. A simple one: what is in my control today? Not what do I have to do, not what am I worried about, not what do I hope will happen. What is actually genuinely within my control today? Epictetus built his entire philosophy on this distinction. He called it the most important division a human mind can make. Everything in life falls into one of two categories. What is yours to direct, and what is not? And the degree to which you confuse these two categories is the precise degree to which your life will feel unstable. "Make the best use of what is in your power," he wrote, "and take the rest as it happens." That line reads simply. It is not simple, because the mind does not naturally make this separation. It reaches constantly into what is not its territory. It worries about outcomes it cannot guarantee. It rehearses conversations that have not happened. It constructs futures filled with threats that exist only in imagination. And all of that reaching, all of that expenditure of mental energy into territory that belongs to no one, leaves you exhausted before the day has truly begun. The Stoic morning practice interrupts this. It draws a line. On one side, what you can control, your effort, your intention, your attention, your responses, your character. On the other side, everything else. And then, not with force, not with suppression, but with a quiet and practiced clarity, It returns your full attention to the first side. This is not a 5-second thought. It is a practice. In the beginning, it takes longer. The mind wanders back toward what it cannot control, because that is what it has been trained to do. It takes practice to redirect, to notice the wandering and bring it back, to sit with the discomfort of releasing what is not yours and focusing entirely on what is. But over 30 days, something shifts. The separation becomes faster, more natural. The mind begins to make the distinction automatically, before it has lost itself in the territory of the uncontrollable. And when that happens, when that distinction becomes the first act of every morning, the entire quality of how you move through the day changes, not because the day has fewer problems, because you are no longer spending your energy on problems that were never yours to solve. Marcus Aurelius did not just think about who he would be each morning, he wrote it down. This matters more than it appears to. There is a significant difference between a thought that moves through the mind and a thought that is committed to the page. A thought that moves through can be forgotten. It can be overridden by the first urgent thing that arrives. It can dissolve in the face of difficulty without leaving any trace of the intention it contained. But a thought that has been written down has been examined. It has been slowed down enough to be seen clearly. It has moved from the vague realm of intention into the specific, accountable realm of language. And language, as the Stoics understood, shapes how we see, and therefore how we act. The practice of Stoic morning journaling is not about writing beautifully. It is not about recording feelings or narrating the day ahead. It is about one thing: clarity. The kind of clarity that only emerges when you slow the mind enough to ask what it actually thinks and honest enough to write what actually appears. Marcus Aurelius wrote things in his meditations that were not comfortable to write. He reminded himself of his own weaknesses. He challenged his own assumptions. He confronted the patterns in his thinking that he knew from honest observation were not serving him. Confine yourself to the present, he wrote, not as a reminder to others, as a command to himself, because he knew, through years of self-observation, that his own mind had a tendency to drift into territory that weakened him, and so he wrote it down, every morning, as a deliberate act of redirection. Your morning journal does not need to be long. It does not need to be eloquent. 3 questions, answered honestly in the space of 5 to 10 minutes, will do more for the quality of your day than any motivational content you have ever consumed. The first question: what am I carrying from yesterday that I need to put down before today begins? Not to dwell on yesterday, to consciously release it. Because the mind that begins a new day still dragging the weight of the previous one does not begin fresh. It begins compromised. And a compromised start compounds throughout the day in ways that are subtle but significant. The second question: what matters today? Not what is urgent, but what actually matters. This distinction is one of the most important the Stoics ever made. Urgency creates the illusion of importance. The inbox, the notifications, the requests of other people, these feel important because they demand attention immediately. But most of them are not aligned with what genuinely matters in your life. The Stoic morning practice forces you to identify what does before urgency has had the chance to crowd it out. The third question: what kind of person do I intend to be today? Not based on how I feel, but based on what I value. This question changes everything, because how you feel in the morning is not always aligned with who you want to be. Some mornings you feel strong and clear. Some mornings you feel uncertain, tired, resistant. The person who lets their feeling determine their character will be different people on different days. The Stoic who has already answered this question, who has committed in writing before the day begins, has something to return to when feeling fails. The Stoic morning is not complete with intention alone. Intention without engagement with reality is philosophy, and philosophy that does not change how you act is decoration. This is where most morning routine advice fails. It prepares you beautifully for the ideal version of the day and leaves you completely unprepared for the real one. Marcus Aurelius did something in his morning practice that modern productivity culture almost never recommends. He anticipated difficulty, specifically, deliberately, before it arrived. He called this the premeditation of adversity. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, and it is the practice of sitting quietly in the morning and thinking through the specific challenges the day is likely to bring, not to fill yourself with dread, but to drain them of their power to surprise you. Because here is what surprise does to the mind. It triggers reaction. And reaction, pure, unmediated, automatic reaction, is the enemy of everything the Stoic morning practice is building. When something unexpected hits you and you react immediately, the character you built in the quiet of the morning dissolves instantly. The patience you decided to practice disappears the moment the first person behaves impatiently toward you. The calm you intended to carry vanishes the moment the first crisis arrives. Unless you already anticipated it. Unless this morning, in the quiet, before any of it happened, you already sat with the thought, someone today will say something that could provoke me. What do I do? You already considered, a plan will fail today, or be delayed, or be complicated by something outside my control. How does a person of my values respond to that? You already prepared. I will feel the pull of old patterns today. The familiar reactions will arrive and feel automatic. And in that moment, there is a pause, a space, a choice. Seneca wrote, "Nothing happens to the wise man contrary to his expectation, not because the wise man can predict the future, but because he has already prepared his mind for the full range of what the future might bring. And in that preparation, he has removed the element of shock that turns difficulty into catastrophe." This practice takes no more than 3 to 5 minutes. Sit with the day ahead. Think about where the friction is likely to come from. Think about the moments where the automatic version of you, the reactive, unguarded, unprepared version, would make a choice you would later regret. And decide now, before those moments arrive, what the intentional version of you will do instead. This is not negative thinking. This is not preparation for failure. This is the specific practice that allows you to move through a genuinely difficult day without being broken by it. Because you have already been there, in your mind, in the quiet of the morning. You have already faced it and decided. There is something else Marcus Aurelius did every morning that is almost never discussed in the popular conversation about Stoicism. He read, not casually, not to consume content. He read to be challenged, to encounter ideas that disturbed the patterns of his thinking, to find in the words of other philosophers the specific corrections to the specific weaknesses he had identified in himself through honest self-observation. He wrote about this practice directly in his meditations. He acknowledged his teachers. He quoted their ideas. He wrestled with them in writing. And through that wrestling, he refined his own understanding, not just of philosophy, but of himself. The Stoic morning practice includes what we might call a period of deliberate input, not the passive, involuntary input of notifications and news and other people's opinions flooding the mind before it has established its own direction, but a chosen, intentional encounter with ideas that matter. This can be as brief as 10 minutes, a single page of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, a passage from Seneca's Letters, a paragraph of Epictetus. Not to study, not to memorize, to sit with one idea, just one, and ask, where does this apply to my life today? Where am I failing to live this? What would it look like in the specific circumstances of my actual day to take this seriously? That single question, applied to a single idea, read slowly, held with attention, does more for the quality of your thinking than an hour of passive consumption, because it is not adding information to the mind. It is sharpening the instrument that processes all information. It is reminding the mind of what it has decided to value at the precise moment when it is most available to receive that reminder. By the time Marcus Aurelius left his private morning space and entered the full weight of his day, he had done something that most of the people he would encounter had not. He had decided who he was, not who he felt like being, not who he was in the mood to be, not the version of himself shaped by whatever had happened last or whatever was being demanded of him now. He had decided with clarity and intention what kind of person would show up today, what values would guide the decisions, what character would meet the difficulty. That decision, made in private before anything else, is the real product of the Stoic morning practice. Not a feeling of calm, not a sense of readiness, a decision, solid, committed, grounded in something more durable than mood. And here is what 30 days of this practice actually does to a person. In the first week, it is uncomfortable. The mind resists the stillness. It wants to reach for the phone. It wants to begin the day's momentum immediately. The practice feels unnatural because it is interrupting something that has been automatic for years. That discomfort is not a sign that it is not working. It is the precise sign that it is. In the second week, the questions begin to shift. The morning journal stops feeling like an exercise and starts feeling like a conversation, a real one, between the person you have been and the person you have decided to become. You begin to notice things about your patterns that you would not have seen without the daily practice of honest self-examination. Small things. The way you move through certain situations. The reactions that arrive before you have chosen them. The stories you have been telling yourself without ever questioning whether they are true. In the third week, something changes in how the day feels. Not because the days have become easier, because you are meeting them differently. The difficult moments arrive, and for the first time, they do not completely surprise you. You have been there already. In the morning, you anticipated them. You prepared, and in the space between what happens and how you respond, there is a fraction of a second more awareness than there was before. That fraction changes everything. By the fourth week, by the end of 30 days, it is no longer a practice. It is beginning to become a nature, not a forced routine, a chosen way of beginning, something the mind reaches for rather than resists, because by now it knows the difference between a day begun with intention and a day handed over to whatever arrives first. And it has experienced enough of both to know which one it prefers. Marcus Aurelius practiced this for decades, not 30 days, decades. And what emerged from that practice was not perfection. He wrote about his own failures throughout the meditations. He was not a man who had transcended difficulty. He was a man who had become exceptionally good at meeting it. That is what this practice builds. Not a life without problems. A person equipped to handle problems without being defined by them. A person who, regardless of what the day brings, begins it with a mind that has been cleaned and directed and committed to something that matters. Seneca wrote, "Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est." Everything belongs to others. Time alone is ours. The morning is your time. The one part of the day that belongs entirely to you before anyone else's demands have touched it. What you do with it is not a small thing. It is the foundation on which everything else is built. And the question is not whether you have time for this practice. The question is whether you can afford not to have it, because the alternative is not neutral. The alternative is a mind shaped by whatever arrives first, which, in the modern world, is almost never the thing most worth carrying. There is one final thing about the Stoic morning practice that is almost never mentioned, and it may be the most important. It is not about becoming more productive. This cannot be said clearly enough, because the moment most people hear morning routine, they think output, they think efficiency, they think, what can I accomplish before 9 a.m.? And that framing, however well-intentioned, misses the entire point of what the Stoics were building. Marcus Aurelius was not trying to get more done. He was trying to become more himself, more aligned, more honest, more genuinely present in his own life, not as a performance for anyone else, but as a private daily act of fidelity to the person he had decided to be. The output followed, the effectiveness followed, the stability and the clarity and the capacity to handle what life brought, all of that followed. But it followed as a consequence, not as the goal. And this distinction matters enormously because a morning practice built around output will collapse the moment it stops producing output. It becomes another thing to optimize, another metric to track, another way for the day to grade you. But a morning practice built around character, around the daily act of deciding who you are and how you intend to live, that practice does not depend on results. It continues regardless of how the day turns out. It remains stable when the external world is not. It is not a productivity system that serves your ambition. It is a philosophical practice that serves your humanity. And that is why, when Marcus Aurelius writes in his Meditations, these private words never intended for anyone but himself, there is a quality of presence that no productivity journal has ever captured, because he was not writing to improve his output, he was writing to remain himself, to stay honest, to keep choosing, day after day, in the quiet of the morning before the empire arrived, the kind of human being he had decided it was worth being. You do not have an empire, but you have a life. And that life, the specific, unrepeatable daily texture of your actual existence, deserves the same care, the same intention, the same deliberate act of claiming the morning before it claims you. 30 days, not to transform your productivity, to transform your relationship with yourself, to discover through practice rather than theory what it actually feels like to begin a day as the author of your own mind rather than its passenger. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not to yesterday, not to tomorrow, not to the weight of everything that is uncertain or uncontrolled or unresolved, to the present, to this morning, to this specific, available, unrepeatable moment. Right now, where the decision gets made. The decision is not complicated. It does not require a system or a schedule or an alarm set 90 minutes earlier than usual. It requires only this, that before the day takes you, you take the day. That before the noise arrives, you find the signal. That before you become what the morning makes of you, you decide what the morning will make. This is what the Stoics understood. This is what Marcus Aurelius practiced. This is what 30 days, 30 consecutive mornings of quiet, honest, intentional practice will show you about yourself that nothing else can. Not who you could be someday, who you already are when you stop letting everything else decide for you. Most people will finish this video and return to their morning exactly as it was. Not because they disagree with what they heard, but because change is uncomfortable and familiar is easy, and the gap between knowing and doing has always been wider than it looks. But you do not have to be most people. You have heard enough to know that the morning you have been giving away is worth reclaiming, that the mind you have been handing to noise and urgency and other people's agendas is capable of something entirely different when you treat it with the care it deserves. Start tomorrow, not with a perfect system, with one question asked honestly before the phone is touched. Who do I intend to be today? That is enough to begin. Everything else grows from there. And if you are ready to go beyond a single question, if you want a complete daily structure that walks you through this practice one morning at a time for 30 days, we have built something specifically for that. It is called the Stoic Morning. A short, practical ebook built entirely on the philosophy you just heard. 30 days, one Stoic quote, one reflection, one practice, every single morning. No fluff, no padding, just the tools that make this real. The link is in the description. It will take you less than a minute to get it. And tomorrow morning, instead of reaching for your phone, you will reach for something that actually builds you. If something in this video shifted something in you, do not let it fade. Stay with it. Build on it. Subscribe if you want to keep returning to this kind of thinking, not for motivation, but for the clarity that comes from engaging with ideas that take the whole of you seriously. The morning is waiting. Thank you for being here.